can't see me, you Stevie. Wondering how I reach more evolutions than Eevee and make it look easy.
What is up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It's Blerd without fear. Welcome back to the channel. Today's video, I'm going to be talking about Moon Knight number 18 by Jed MacKay and Federico Sabatini. This issue of Moon Knight, and if you haven't been keeping up with Moon Knight, one of the things you need to know is Moon Knight has been going up against a vampire pyramid scheme organization called the Structure. This is something that has been in effect since Jed MacKay took over writing duties on Moon Knight. It's how Mark Spector came to know the vampire character of Reese, who has become a bit of a confidant for him and maybe even a potential love interest somewhere down the road, or at the very least, just very, very close allies. This issue does something really amazing. Actually, it does two really amazing things for me. And one of those things, and I'm gonna go ahead and say it right now, and I know a lot of people are gonna get upset by this. I know a lot of Blade stands are going to be flaming me in the comments on this one, so I've already prepared myself for such a tongue lashing. However, I'm gonna go ahead and say it. It's the fact that Moon Knight in this issue proves that he is a much more creative, and I would even dare say more effective vampire hunter than Blade. Now, I know what you're thinking. Put the pitchforks away. Just sit back, let me cook for a little bit, and you'll get where I'm coming from. The thing is, in this issue, Moon Knight has been going up against the Structure, and the Structure sent a couple of hard-hitting assassins after Moon Knight in the previous issue. Assassins by the name of Grand Mal and the Nemean Lion. These were characters Moon Knight had never interacted with before, and they beat the brakes off of Moon Knight just a couple of issues prior. The thing that was amazing in all of this is that we learned a lot about Moon Knight and what's possible for Moon Knight as a character just based on the previous issue's battle between Hunter's Moon, who is considered the left hand of Khonshu, whereas Mark Spector, aka Moon Knight, is the right hand of Khonshu. Hunter's Moon is his polar opposite. And while originally they had butted heads with one another and were even enemies for a very brief moment, they had become allies in the Midnight Mission. And when Grand Mal and the Nemean Lion took on Hunter's Moon, who tried to take them down solo dolo, Hunter's Moon was killed. Now, the beauty about this is, while it did seem like, oh my god, Hunter's Moon, they've killed him off already, which, I mean, this is comics, we should have known better, but the truth is, he didn't die. You can't die when you are the hand of Khonshu. Khonshu's always gonna bring you back, baby. As Mark Spector even told Grand Mal and Nemean Lion when he drugged them through the House of Shadows and showed them their worst nightmares. Fists of Khonshu don't die. And not only do they not die, they're also very resourceful. And what I mean by that is, at the end of Moon Knight number 17, Moon Knight, in his Mr. Knight garb, had just strutted into one of the Structure's big meetings with Tigress on his arm, and this meeting was huge because it was all of the major players in the vampire community in one place at the same time, all with the exception of Dracula. Dracula didn't show up himself. He sent envoys in his place, but pretty much every other major hitter in the vampire community was at this meeting. And when the Structure was giving their speech to try and convince the other vampire communities across the globe to adopt the same system, the same pyramid scheme system that the Structure utilizes to create more vampires, which basically is exactly what it sounds like. They create vampires, and then their vampires create more vampires, and then those vampires create more vampires, creating a hierarchy, which is something you would kind of already imagine vampires would do on a normal basis. But honestly, if you look deeper into vampire lore, not just, you know, general vampire lore, but in a lot of vampire stories, a lot of the times vampires don't just willy-nilly make more vampires. In many cases, they usually keep that gift to themselves. They're usually very selective in who they turn, and that's whether you read Anne Rice or you play Vampire the Masquerade or you read the Anita Blake stuff, whatever. It doesn't really matter what vampire lore it is. Very rarely do people just willy-nilly make more vampires, and that's what the Structure is doing. But while Tudor, the leader of the Structure, is giving his grand speech, Moon Knight just walks in and talks grimy as all get out, basically declaring war on all suckheads, even at one point saying he will brook no trespass from blood drinkers in his city. And he's being super cool about it. He's not even so much as batting an eyelash as he walks into an entire room full of vampires, and the only backup he has is Tigress. And not to shit on Tigress or anything of that matter, she's very powerful, but she's not a vampire slayer by trade. But the thing is, Moon Knight walks in with the ultimate weapon. You see, he has at his disposal a guy by the name of Soldier, and Soldier used to work for Hydra. Now, for those who have not been keeping up, Soldier very recently was killed by Zodiac, as recent as Moon Knight number 12, and while it seemed like he was dead forever, he actually got turned into a vampire. Now, if you're wondering why Soldier, who was originally just a normal human, suddenly is a vampire now working for the Midnight Mission, it's because when Zodiac tried to shoot Reese, the bullet that went through her pierced her heart, and while it didn't kill her because it wasn't wooden or anything of that nature, the bullet fatally wounded Soldier. But because the bullet had gone through her heart and had a piece of it on it as well as her blood, it inadvertently had turned Soldier into a vampire. So even though technically he died, he came back and he's just now undead. So now Moon Knight has two vampires working for him right now, but one of those vampires, that being Soldier, is an expert computer hacker and system breaker. And what he has done, he's rerouted the building sprinkler systems to all go off at the same time in the room that Moon Knight is standing in. Now you're probably wondering, okay, sprinklers, big deal. Vampires aren't afraid of running water. However, they are afraid of holy water, and Moon Knight is actually considered a priest of Khonshu, meaning he is ordained to create holy water, which he does in this instance, blessing the holy water the second that Tutor begins criticizing him for having such a weak plan. And in doing so, he melts pretty much every vampire in the building, and the ones that don't get killed by this newly blessed holy water are sent to the Shadow Realm by Tigra, who just recently got her nails done, silver claw caps and all that. Not only that, he called in Hunter's Moon to come in and start running fades on any vampires that Tigra missed, and they kill every last one of them down to the last vampire, or rather in this case, a ghoul, someone who is not necessarily a vampire, but they drink vampire blood. They're kind of kept as retainers. If you aren't familiar with this concept, anyone who's seen the original Blade movie or plays Vampire the Masquerade or reads any vampire fiction, you're probably familiar with this concept, but if you're not familiar, ghouls are basically just people. They're normal humans. They're not undead, but they do drink a vampire blood, and in some cases, depending on what fiction you read, sometimes that blood gives them power greater than that of a normal human and gives them more longevity than that of a normal human, but they're never as powerful as an actual dyed-in-the-wool vampire. And usually they're kept as ghouls until one day they are turned, if that ever happens. But that's exactly what they're doing, and Moon Knight is using this ghoul to send a message to Chernobyl, and this is how we're gonna wind up getting Blade, because as some of you may or may not remember, Blade is the sheriff of Chernobyl, and Chernobyl is considered the vampire nation. Blade works for Dracula nowadays, or technically doesn't necessarily work for Dracula. He kind of does, he kind of doesn't, but he does actually work in tandem with Dracula to help oversee the vampire nation of Chernobyl and make sure they don't get out of line, whether that's issues within the nation of Chernobyl or them getting into all kind of shenanigans outside of Chernobyl. And I'm pretty sure that everything Moon Knight just did is the reason Blade is gonna come knocking on his door. The question is Blade gonna be a friend or an enemy? All in all, this issue is great. We get the tease of the return of Zodiac. Zodiac is well and on his way to coming back, and which is no surprise. He's kind of Moon Knight's new deadliest arch nemesis these days. And I also really like the character development we get with the character Soldier in this issue, because it's one of those deals where, and I know some people are gonna get iffy about this, but I like the fact that Jed MacKay treated Hydra in this instance, because once again, Soldier is a former Hydra agent who has now reformed and turned his life around. But Soldier says a lot of very telling things that I have heard real life former white supremacists say about how they were radicalized. And that's what Soldier talks about in this issue, about how he was radicalized by Hydra, that they said all the things that made sense to him at the time. And this issue is that moment where fantasy kind of touches on real life. Art imitates life, life imitates art kind of deal. But I like how Jed MacKay is taking this moment to say, this is how you get neo-Nazis and white nationalists. And it's one of those things where I like the fact that Jed MacKay is not making Soldier try and make it seem like it's not his fault, that it is his fault. He was the one who fell for the trap that Hydra laid for him. He fell for all the lies that they told him. It's one of those deals where he's apologizing, but he's not deflecting his blame in any of this, but he's also explaining to Reese why he doesn't want to be that thing he used to be anymore, why he is no longer a Hydra agent, and why the Midnight Mission is the best thing that ever happened to him. And this is something that I really love. I love the idea of the Midnight Mission. I've actually said this before in previous videos I've done about Moon Knight, but I love this mission because it's something that I feel every reader, any reader could get behind. The idea of, yeah, you're a superhero. Yeah, you save the world. Yeah, you fight to protect your neighborhood, whatever, that's cool. But the idea of doing these things, but also at the same time, trying to make the world you protect a better place, as well as making the people in it better themselves and giving people who want to be better a chance to be better, and showing those that think they know the right way that there is an alternative way. I like that concept. It's something that I'm surprised no one's thought of it for Moon Knight in the past. This is something I would love to see in the MCU, if I'm being brutally honest. But anyways, that's everything I wanted to talk about with Moon Knight number 18. If you're new to the channel or you just simply forget, hit that subscribe button and make sure you tap that notification bell. That way you always get notifications on every video I do. I do videos all the time about my favorite comics from Marvel, DC, and other imprints. So make sure you don't miss those, plus any future Moon Knight videos that I have coming up. And also, before you leave, make sure to Hulk smash that like button and hit the share button. It really helps the channel out and will help us grow Earth's mightiest subscribers beyond Plus Ultra. In the meantime, let me know what you thought about Moon Knight number 18. Keep it Plus Ultra and sound off in the comments.